There's a specific moment I see in my clinical work over and over where a woman describes a man and her whole face changes, and it's almost never because of anything grand. It's not the expensive dinner or the dramatic gesture. It's something small he did that told her, on a level she couldn't even fully articulate, that she was safe with him. So today I want to break down 10 of those things, the non-sexual, often invisible behaviors that create real, lasting attraction. And I want to be really clear about this up front. This isn't a manipulation list. This isn't tricks to make her obsessed with you. This is actually about becoming a person who's genuinely safe and steady to be around, because it turns out that's what creates obsession in the first place. Funny how that works. The first thing I want to talk about is remembering the small details. Not the big stuff. Everyone remembers your girlfriend's birthday if they're paying any attention at all. I mean the tiny things. She mentioned 3 weeks ago that her coworker was stressing her out about a project, and he asks, "Hey, did that project ever get resolved?" That's it. That's the whole move. And I've seen this with clients again and again, where a woman will tell me about a guy she's seeing, and the thing she brings up isn't a compliment he gave her, it's that he remembered something she said in passing. Psychologically, this taps into something called attunement, which is basically the felt sense that someone is tracking your inner world, not just the facts of your life, but the emotional weight underneath them. When someone remembers the small stuff, your brain registers it as, this person is actually paying attention to me, and that registers as safety. And safety, weirdly enough, is one of the most attractive things a person can offer. The second thing is being consistent. Even when it's boring, I know, consistency does not sound sexy, but let me explain what I mean. There's a difference between a guy who's intensely into you for 2 weeks and then goes cold, and a guy who just shows up the same way week after week, texts back in a reasonable time, follows through on plans, doesn't have wild mood swings depending on his day. This is where I want to bring in attachment theory for a second, because it explains so much of this. A lot of people, especially those with more anxious attachment patterns, have nervous systems that are constantly scanning for instability. And when a man is predictable in a good way, it actually calms that scanning system down. It's not boring to the brain, it's regulating. Now, does this mean spontaneity is bad? Of course not. Spontaneity is great, but it has to sit on top of a foundation of reliability, or it just reads as chaos. Third one, and this is a big one, is that he doesn't flinch when she has a big emotion. Let me give you a picture. She's venting about her mom, and she starts crying a little, maybe her voice gets sharp. A lot of men, understandably, kind of shrink back in that moment. They either try to fix it immediately, or they go quiet and awkward, or worst case, they get defensive like she's mad at them. But the men who create real deep attraction are the ones who can just stay. Not fix, not flee, just stay present. I had a client once describe her partner as the calm in the room, and when I asked her to unpack that, she said it was because during her worst moments, he never once made her feel like she was too much. That phrase, too much, comes up constantly in my sessions, by the way. So many women have been told, directly or indirectly, that their emotions are a burden. A man who can just sit with intensity without needing to control it is doing something genuinely rare. Here's a quick gut check for you. Think about the last time you were upset in front of someone. Did they lean in or did they lean away? That tells you almost everything about emotional safety in that relationship. The fourth thing is asking follow-up questions. This sounds so simple, it's almost embarrassing to include, but it is shockingly rare. Most conversations, especially early on, are just two people waiting for their turn to talk about themselves. A man who asks a question actually listens to the answer and then asks a second question based on what she just said. That's doing something most people never learn how to do. There's actually a concept in relationship psychology called responsiveness, and researchers have found it's one of the strongest predictors of relationship satisfaction, way more than things like shared hobbies or even physical chemistry. Responsiveness basically means, do you understand me, do you validate me, and do you care? Follow-up questions are like a free, easy way to signal all three at once. Number 5 is protecting her time and energy without being asked to. This looks like things like he notices she's exhausted and just quietly takes something off her plate. He doesn't make a big show of it, he just does it. I want to share something from my own life here, actually. I had a rough week a while back, just back-to-back deadlines, and a friend of mine noticed and just showed up with dinner, no fanfare, no, look how thoughtful I am, just handed me food and left me alone to work. I still remember that more than almost any grand gesture anyone's ever done for me. There's something about being seen in your exhaustion and having someone respond without needing credit for it. It hits different. The 6th thing, and this one trips a lot of men up, is that he doesn't get threatened by her success or her independence. I've worked with so many women who downplay their achievements around men because they've learned, painfully, that some men get weird about it. Insecure, competitive, distant. But the men who create real attraction are the ones who get genuinely excited when she wins. Not performatively excited, actually excited. This connects to something psychologists call basking in reflected glory, but flipped in a healthy direction, where instead of needing to be the center of accomplishment in the relationship, a securely attached person feels good specifically because their partner is thriving. That's a sign of real security, not just in the relationship, but in himself. Now, I want to pause here and give the disclaimer I promised, because I don't want this to sound like men are just supposed to be endlessly self-sacrificing and never have needs of their own. That's not healthy either. And honestly, it usually backfires because a man with no needs of his own can start to feel less like a partner and more like a service. The healthiest version of all of this involves a man who has his own life, his own goals, his own emotional needs, and still manages to show up for her in these ways. It's not about disappearing yourself, it's about being solid enough that you don't need her to shrink to make you comfortable. The seventh thing is physical presence that isn't sexual. Just an arm around her while watching TV, a hand on her back walking through a crowd. These tiny moments of non-sexual touch actually release oxytocin, which is sometimes called the bonding hormone, and it builds a kind of physical trust that's completely separate from anything sexual. I've had clients tell me that the moment they really fell for someone wasn't a kiss, it was something like him just resting his hand on her knee during a hard conversation. No agenda, just contact. That kind of touch says, "I'm here," without a single word. Eighth is that he actually apologizes. And I mean really apologizes. Not the kind where the sentence has a but hiding in it. You know the ones. "I'm sorry, but you were kind of overreacting." That's not an apology, that's a defense with a costume on. A real apology takes ownership without immediately trying to balance the scales. And this is hard because most of us grew up watching adults apologize badly, so we never actually learned the skill. When a man can say something like, "You're right, that was hurtful, I'm sorry," and just let that sit without needing to justify himself, it does something enormous for trust. It signals that his ego isn't more important than the relationship. Ninth, and this might be my favorite one, is that he remembers how she likes to be loved, not how he'd want to be loved. This goes back to the classic idea of love languages, which yes, is a little oversimplified as a framework, but the underlying truth holds up. Some women feel most loved through words, some through acts of service, some through quality time. A man who pays attention to which one actually lands for her instead of just doing what feels natural to him is doing something that takes real emotional effort. I had a client once whose partner wasn't a big talker, words of affirmation weren't his thing at all, but he noticed she lit up every time he planned little outings for just the two of them. So that's what he leaned into. Not because a book told him to, but because he was actually paying attention to her specifically. And the 10th thing, the one I think ties all of these together, is that he makes her feel like herself around him. Not a performance of herself, not a filtered version, just her. This is honestly the hardest one to fake, and it's also the one that creates the deepest and longest lasting attraction because it's rooted in something called psychological safety. This idea that you can be fully honest, even messy, even uncertain, without fear of losing the relationship over it. Everything else on this list, the memory, the consistency, the emotional steadiness, the touch, the real apologies, they're all just pathways to this one thing, feeling safe enough to be fully yourself. So here's what I want you to take away from all this. None of these 10 things require money, status, or some kind of alpha male personality. They require attention, consistency, and emotional maturity, which honestly is available to basically anyone willing to work on it. If you're a man watching this and thinking, okay, where do I even start? Start with the smallest one. Remember one detail from your next conversation and bring it up later. That's it. That's genuinely enough to begin. I hope this gave you something real to sit with today. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one.